This article deals in detail with the action on the 19th of May 1692. For an overview of the battle, its background and aftermath, see Battles of Barfleur and La Hogue. The action at Barfleur was part of the Battle of Barfleur-La Hogue during the War of the Grand Alliance. A French fleet under Anne Hilarion de Tourville was seeking to cover an invasion of England by a French army to restore James II to the throne, but was intercepted by an Anglo-Dutch fleet under Edward Russell, 1st Earl of Orford, on the 19th of May Old Style 1692. Background: the fleet sighted each other at first light on the morning of the 19th of May 1692 off Cap Barfleur on the Cotentin Peninsula. On sighting the Allied fleet at about 6 a.m., Tourville held a council of war with his captains. The advice, and his own opinion, was against action. However, Tourville felt compelled by strict orders from the king to engage. He also may have expected defections from the English fleet by captains with Jacobite sympathies, though in this he was to be disappointed. In the light southwesterly breeze the fleet slowly closed Russell from the northeast, Tourville, with the weather gauge, from the southwest, on a starboard tack to bring his line of battle into contact with Russell's. Because of the calm conditions, it was not until 11 a.m., 5 hours after first sighting each other, that the two fleets were within range of each other. Dispositions: the French line was led by the Blue and White Squadron, 14 ships of the line in 3 divisions under the flag officers Nesmond, D. Amfreville and Reeling. They were matched by the Dutch White Squadron of 26 ships under Armand, again in 3 divisions under Van der Putte, Gilles and Calemberg. In the center, the French White Squadron opposed the English Red Squadron. Bringing up the rear, the French Blue Squadron would face the English Blue Squadron. Tourville reinforced his center, the White Squadron under his own command, by bringing Coetlogon's division forward in order to engage Russell's Red Squadron with something approaching equal numbers, while he refused and extended the line of his White Squadron to avoid them being turned and overwhelmed by superior numbers. The rest of his Blue Squadron he held back also to keep the advantage of the weather gauge. Russell countered by holding fire as long as possible, to allow the French fleet to close. Armand tried to extend his line to overlap the French van, while Ashby was still some way off and trying to close. The two fleets were within range at 11 a.m., but both withheld firing for a further 15 minutes, until the St. Louis fired on her opposite number, and that the firing became general up and down the line. Action: morning, 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. For the next few hours, Tourville's White and Russell's Red Squadrons were closely engaged, and causing each other considerable damage. Centurion 50 was engaged by Amber 296 and severely damaged. Chester 50 was outgunned by Glory U-64 and had to withdraw. Eagle 70 was forced to pull out of the line, with 70 dead, to repair damage, but was able to rejoin after emergency repairs, while Grafton 70 suffered 80 casualties, but was able to continue. On the French side, Soleil Royal 104 was engaged by 3 English ships, Britannia 100, supported by London 96 and St Andrew 56. She was severely damaged, and forced at one point out of the line. Pearl 52 was shot through and suffered 1/3 of her crew as casualties. Henry 64 and Fort 60 were both severely damaged trying to hold the line between the White and the Blue and White Squadrons. To prevent a gap opening, Henry was battered until she could no longer fight, and only escaped capture when Villette sent boats to tow her to safety. Fort's crew were forced to use sweeps to pull her out of the line. 4. Respite. Action. Afternoon. 1 p.m. At about 1 p.m. the wind, which up to then had been southwesterly, if it blew at all, strengthened and shifted to the east. This gave the benefit of the weather gauge to the Allies, who immediately took advantage of it. Tourville saw a gap in the French line ahead of him, and steered towards it. His Royal William 100 broke through to engage the French white from both sides. He was followed by the rest of his division, while Kent 70 and St. Albans 50, who were ahead of him in the line, pulled round to follow the William through the breach. Hampton Court 70 and Swiftsure 70, which were ahead of them again, remained to the windward of the French, and joined themselves to Russell's division. Carter, with the leading Blue Division, saw Chauvel's action and followed also, giving about a dozen ships, doubling the French line. In the van, the wind enabled Armand to extend and cross the head of the French line. Nesmond responded by turning his division into the wind also, so that over the next few hours the French blue and white became at right angles to the center. Chauvel's action brought Tourville's ships under fire from both sides. Soleil Royal particularly was hard-pressed until Coetlogon, with Magnifique 86 and Prince 56 interposed. 3 p.m. By 3 o'clock the French line was curved leeward like a fishhook. The blue and white was turned back to the center, with the Dutch extended around them. When Prince 56 was hotly engaged on both sides, with a third across her stern, she was saved by Monarch 90, Nesmond's flagship. In the center, Coetlogon and Tourville were engaged on either side by Chauvel and Russell, while Carter was matched by the French rear divisions. To the east, Ashby and Rooke were endeavoring to get into action. 4 p.m. By 4 o'clock the wind had died, the sea becoming flat calm, and visibility dropping due to battle smoke. The continuous firing also tended to push the embattled ships apart, offering some respite as both sides were becoming exhausted. In the van, Nesmond continued to turn as Armand continued to extend and turn the line, both sides using boats to tow the ships into position, while in the rear Ashby was also using boats to bring his blue squadron into the fray. In the poor visibility, however, he was unable to see Carter, his vice-admiral, who was in the position of advantage with Chauvel beyond the French line, and sorely pressed. He continued to head towards the French blue squadron, which was north of the main action. 5 p.m. By 5 p.m. the centers were re-engaged. Russell had used his boats to tow his ships back into action. The fog had lifted, cleared by a light breeze. As the wind strengthened, Tourville headed northwest towards Carter in order to fight his way out of the encirclement. Russell pursued, until the wind, unpredictable all day, died away and the mist closed in once more. Action. Evening. 6 p.m. At around 6 p.m. the tide began to turn, seeking to take advantage of this, and remembering how the English had escaped after the Battle of Beachy Head 2 years before, Tourville had his ships anchor at the end of slack water, with the sails still set. Deceived by this, Russell's squadron was carried away by the flood tide, until they could themselves anchor, now out of range, giving the French a respite. Chauvel's ships, up-tide of the French, had also anchored, either foreseeing the French maneuver, or seeking respite themselves. Only Sandwich 90 was unprepared, and was swept by the flood into and through the French line, being severely damaged, and suffering many casualties, including her captain. 7 p.m. At around 7 p.m. the wind arose again, from the southeast, allowing the English blue squadron to join the action. Because of Ashby's previous maneuvers, Rooke's division was now closer to the embattled Red Squadron, and joined the fray. Neptune 96, Windsor Castle 90 and Expedition 70 were able to engage the French ships ships, particularly Soleil Royal and Amber II, increasing the damage they had already sustained. Ashby, in Victory 100, and the rest of his division joined the fray shortly after, engaging the main body for the next 2 hours. 8 p.m. Tourville's ships were still in range of the French, but found themselves sternwards to the French bows, so only a few guns on either side could be engaged. From his position up tide, Tourville attempted to break up the French formation by sending fire ships onto them with the tide. His intent was to oblige Tourville to cut his anchor cables to escape them, leaving him to drift with the tide onto Russell's guns. 4 fireships were released, but the French were able to fend them off. One fireship became entangled with Pearl, but her crew were able to cut it loose. Another, released by Cambridge 70 and aimed at Soleil Royal, came so close as to persuade the French flagship to cut, but she was able to re-anchor before coming within range of Russell's ships. 9 p.m. At around 9 p.m. Tourville and Rooke decided the position was too exposed to be tenable, as the only ships between the French fleet and the open sea, and being out of contact with the rest of the Allied fleet. They decided to use the last of the flood tide to sail through the French fleet and rejoin the English line. French contemporary accounts present this as a mistake, as the position placed Tourville in some difficulty, but it is conceivable that if the whole French fleet swept down on them on the ebb, they would be overwhelmed. As it was, the maneuver was fraught with difficulty. All the ships were exposed to close raking fire, and were cut up severely. Action. Night. 10 p.m. By 10 p.m. the battle was almost over. Both sides were exhausted, and the majority of the ships on both sides were damaged, many severely. Amazingly, none of the ships from either line were lost, none were sunk or captured. Tourville had expended 4 of his fireships without result, and another had burned earlier after being hit by gunfire. These could be seen burning in the night, and were noted by the captain of the Monmouth in his log. Both sides reported a large explosion around this time, but both thought it was a ship from the opposing fleet. Whichever ship it involved, it was not fatal, as all the ships from both lines were accounted for after the action. On the turn of the tide, and in the moonlight, Tourville ordered the French fleet to cut their anchor cables and slip away. The Allies followed on as they could. Ships